Thank you, Ashley, for your service here tonight. I'm David G. I'm alcoholic and addict of many sorts and blessed with a recovery date of August 8th, 1994 in Alcoholics Anonymous and October 1st of 2019 in the SA program. Very grateful to have celebrated 3 years with my fellowship there this past week. And what a great blessing that's been in my life and the lives of many others. So very, very grateful. Blessed to have done this work as it's outlined in our book, with a loving and a forgiving God. I wouldn't say he was really a patient Big Book Step Study sponsor, but he was a Big Book Step Study sponsor and a very good one. I've made all my amends but one amend that I have left to make. And I do practice steps 10, 11, and 12 as a new way to live today. We've been studying for some weeks through the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous now. We've really dug in deep and took a look at what the trouble really is. We talked about from the beginning, if alcohol is your problem, just don't drink alcohol and you shouldn't have a problem anymore. If acting out, lust, overeating, undereating, whatever it may be is the problem, just don't do that anymore. You shouldn't have any more problem. But like us, when you stop, the problem seems to show up in the mind. And it's very unsettled and it's very unsatisfied and it's very unhappy. And we see through the examples as outlined in the book, we're really dominated by our beliefs and our experiences and our concepts and our ideas and our emotions and our attitudes and all this stuff. We're dominated by that. We don't even really know it. So when I see that, I'm powerless in step one. Anybody with any sense, which was not me, would know that power would have to be the answer there. It would just have to be. So if I'm powerless, power is the answer. If insanity is what's driving my life and it's causing all kinds of hell and destruction as it did, then obviously sanity must be the answer to that. So tonight we take a look at chapter 4, we agnostics. And the word agnostics itself, if you look at the word gnostics, that just means knowledge. Any old school dictionary you look at, the word gnostics means knowledge, and AG in front of that word just means without. So really that word means without knowledge. And see, I'm not without belief. I'm without knowledge. And that's a hell of a big difference because most of us come in here believing something already. We just haven't relied on the power of that. So we have a lot of knowledge of that. We have a lot of belief about that, but we have very little knowledge of what that actually is. So step 2 doesn't say we come to believe in a power greater than ourselves. It says we come to believe that a power greater than ourselves. And the difference in those two words was life-changing for me because I thought I had to believe in something. I thought I needed to change my belief to believe in something. And the step's not asking me to do any of that at all. It's asking me if your beliefs, as you discovered them in chapters 2 and 3, shows you that your beliefs is what's dominated you, and that's what's drove your insanity, why would you not come to believe that something greater than self could restore you from that? Now, it's not asking me to believe in God. We came in the step 2, we came to believe in a power greater than ourselves could restore us to that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. We came, those two words are past tense. We already came to that. We've come to that a long time ago, most of us. Some of us come in here without any of that, but very few. Somebody, usually always, most of us come here believing in something. And I like to mention this, and I mention it a lot, and you guys have probably heard it. On Roman numeral 7 of the book, there's a question at the very bottom of that. And it's right before you go into the foreword to the first edition. There's about 3 questions there. It says, we hope that you may pause in reading one of the 42 personal stories and think. Yes, that happened to me. That's a question. Or more important, I felt like that. Or the most important question outlined probably in the whole book. Yes, I believe this program can work for me too. And if I answer that question when I come through this work sincerely with my heart, that I believe that this program can work for me, then I've come to believe in a power greater than myself right then, whether I know that or not. So when we get to here, I don't need to come to believe in God. I've already believed that somehow. But the problem is that we have to unlearn the things that we were taught by those whom were wounded. And that's something that I picked up on a little while back. The people that taught this stuff to me was living a life that was anything but godly. They were good people, very good people. But most of them were alcoholics, and they were drunks, and they were addicts, and they were just crazy. And so the life that they were living showed no godliness to it, at least where I was at. And so they were the ones teaching me about God. So when I get here, I have a bad, bad taste in my mouth for this word God. I don't like it at all. Well, it surprised me to hear, this is the only place I ever heard, you don't really have to believe in anything, but you're going to have to believe that a power greater than self can restore you to sanity. And so that's what the chapter with Agnostics does. It challenges us. It enables us to challenge our beliefs to see if they serve us any longer or if they're no good. I can release them and let them go. So we're going to start on page 44, and we will take a look at the big book here. And it says, in the preceding chapters, Doctor's opinion, Bill's story, there is a solution, more about alcoholism. It says, in those preceding chapters, you have learned something of alcoholism. For me, that's a question. Did I learn something there? I absolutely learned about the physical allergy and the doctor's opinion. There's no doubt. I learned about the mental obsession, the spiritual experience that was needed in order to recover from it. So for that question, for me, absolutely, I learned something of alcoholism. It says, we hope we have made clear the distinction between the alcoholic and the non. Remember the moderate drinker. Remember the hard drinker. And remember the real alcoholic. So here's two questions that is outlined in the book that anytime I work with a newcomer, I try to pay close attention to. And this is it. If when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, that's because of the mental obsession. How many times have we honestly wanted to stop acting out, stop drinking before we got here? I don't know about you, but man, I wanted to quit for a long time. And I just couldn't. And I never knew why. I never knew that this thing would always, always come back to get me. It always did. So my question to him is, if when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, or if when drinking or acting out, you have little control over the amount you take, that's because of the physical allergy. Anytime I put it in my body, I have very little control over the amount I take. It says you're probably alcoholic. Damn, that's easy. I mean, if I just read that and think, man, if that's all I got to do, that's really easy. But, you know, the problem is they took the questions out of the book and they made a pamphlet, which had 10 questions in it. And that wasn't enough. You know, they made one that had 20 in it. And then I think today we're up around somewhere like 44 questions. You'll have to read it for yourself to see what I'm talking about. I would hate to think that Evie came to Bill's kitchen and said, all right, I got 44 questions. I want to ask you to determine whether or not you're an alcoholic. And if you get those questions right, then we'll proceed forward. No, Bill would have died, and so would most of us. From what I see here, there's only two questions we need to be concerned about. Once I start, am I able to quit? And once I start to drink, or if when I honestly want to, I find I cannot quit entirely, yes or no? Or if when drinking, do I have a little control over the amount I take? If that's the case, I'm probably alcoholic. And so it was. If that be the case, you may be suffering from an illness, which only a spiritual experience will conquer. I think sometimes that we're some of the most unique people ever. Because for one thing, we suffer from a twofold illness, mental and spiritual, which can only be overcome by spiritual experience. And without that, we die or go insane. We're also some of the most unique people there is because we have a terminal illness that we can come out of better than we was when we went into that, if we have this experience. Very, very powerful if we can have the experience. So here's the problem with this. To one who feels, key word right there, feels he is an atheist or agnostic. Doesn't really mean he does. He just feels. And based on a diseased mind, my feelings are not very true most of the time. I'm not sure about yours, but I'm sure about mine. To one who feels he's an atheist or an agnostic, such an experience seems impossible. But to continue as he is means disaster, especially if he is the alcoholic of the hopeless variety. To be doomed to an alcoholic death, that's step one in this book. We are doomed to an alcoholic death without this experience, a sexaholic death, whatever your issue may be. Or to live on a spiritual basis, that's step two, are not always easy alternatives to face. And the reason is because I don't know how to do either one. I tried to drink myself to death many times. I about died from acting out, but I didn't. And what that looked like in a hopeless state of mind was very, very ugly. Now, to look beyond that and say, okay, I need God in my life to redirect me so that I can live a happy and useful life, that scared me as well. So the alcoholic death and the spiritual basis at this particular time in my life, they look absolutely the same. They're no different. Now, they are today, for sure, but then, no. But the book says it isn't so difficult. About half of our original fellowship were exactly of that type. Half. That's 50 of the first 100 people that wrote this book were of exactly that type. At first, some of us, the first 100, tried to avoid the issue. There's a little deeper reading about the issue on page 53 of this book. It says, hoping against hope that we were not true alcoholics, but after a while we had to face the fact. And if you remember, when we get to our fourth step, we're going to look at some fact-finding and fact-facing stuff there. And the book's telling me here that I'm going to have to face those facts. And one of those facts is that I must find a spiritual basis of life, or else. And I don't like that kind of terminology. That's a promise in this book, by the way. Not all the promises are happy ones here. Well, perhaps it's going to be that way with you, but you're up something like half of us. There's the 50 of that 100. And I love this key word here, thought that we were atheists or agnostics. Our experience shows that you need not be disconcerted or frustrated. And I really need to stop myself right there when I'm going through this work or taking someone through it. Really, there's only one of three ways that a man can believe in God. One is the atheist who says that there is no God. He can prove there is no God. He can stand on his own 2 feet and anything. He can do whatever he wants to do. And then there's the agnostic. And I had to ask myself on that first one, am I atheist? And no, I was absolutely sure that there probably was a God, but I had no connection to that God, never had. And that's what the agnostic is. He's without knowledge. He has a belief, but he really doesn't have any knowledge of the power of God and how it could work in his life. I think most of us come in here like that. They know that there is a God, but since we don't rely on his power, we only believe he exists. Well, whenever I turn that all over, there's a hell of a long set of bad habits that I have behind me that I don't know how to do anything with. And if you tell me all I have to do is believe in God and all that's going to go away, that's a wonderful thing for you to tell me. But my experience tells me that's BS. That normally don't happen, or it didn't for me. And then you've got the person that is a truth-centered believer in God, and they rely on that power, and their life is good, and they have a pretty good life. How do I go from being agnostic to that? That's what I'm wanting to find out. The book says if a mere code of morals or a better philosophy of life were sufficient to overcome alcoholism or lust addiction or whatever it may be, many of us would have recovered long ago, but we found that such codes and philosophies did not save us. How powerful is that? Why would that not save me? Codes and philosophies and all the different religions and all the things that I give myself to, the therapy, all this stuff. And it does me a little good, but I come out of there and I go right back to what I was doing again. All these codes and all these principles that I try to live by, and I don't have the power. And those are very good things, don't get me wrong, but look what the book says. It did not save us. And I've got to have something here that's going to save my ass, for sure. I've got to. And the reason that they do not save me is because addiction and alcoholism is such a bully that it dominates and controls and runs my life in a way that I can't do anything about without a power greater than myself. And I don't have any knowledge of that power at this point. Now, those are very good things, philosophies and different religions and things like that. After the spiritual experience has taken place, many of us have returned to those with a greater joy and message to carry than ever before. And I think as long as I don't try to put that in the place of this, and I add that to this after I've had this experience, I can have a wonderful experience with those. But in my case, not before, because they will not save me. They can't. There's no way. I've tried, and I know. So it says no matter how much I tried, and I tried over and over. We could wish to be moral, and we wish to be philosophically comforted. In fact, we could will these things with all our might. And it's crazy that self uses spiritual principles to try to overcome self. And I stay baffled and confused and caught up in my addiction, and I can't get out. It says but, and I think that's the key word. The needed power was not there. It's just not there. So that's complete unmanageability right there. Our human resources, as marshaled by the will, were not sufficient. They failed us utterly. And I hate to say it, but it is the truth. At this point, even the fellowship is not going to save me. It's going to help me. It's going to move me in the right direction. It's going to get me in touch with people that can put me into the steps if I'm open-minded enough to hear and listen and grab a hold of somebody. But that's not going to save me. I can will those things with all my might, but that needed power is not there. It's just not there. There's great energy in those meetings, but a lot of those people are sick like I am. They haven't had the spiritual experience yet. It failed utterly over and over and over. So what is the solution? If I'm powerless, obviously it has to be power. And if I'm powerless, it tells me right here why. Lack of power. That's my dilemma. That's my problem. Not lack of faith, not lack of trust, not lack of belief in God, not lack of courage, not lack of knowledge, not any of that. Lack of power. That's my dilemma. Well, we had to find a power by which we could live. See, I just don't want to come here to be sober and just go on and, no, I want to live, man. I want to live recovery. It's got to be a power greater than self, obviously, but where and how am I going to find this power? That becomes my main question in this book. If I need this power to live, where am I going to find it? And when we get to page 55 of this book, it's going to tell us exactly where that power's at. Exactly. But it says here, that's exactly what the book is about. And people it's all, well, you always push the book, push the book. Yeah, I push the book. Guarantee I do. Why? Because that's exactly what the book is about. The main object of this book is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. Not enable you to solve it, not help you to solve it, not send you somewhere to solve it. Connect to the power and the problem will be solved, period. The problem is not alcohol. It is not lust. It is not acting out. Problem is lack of power. I'm powerless because of my beliefs. Self has overcome those. People ask me all the time, David, where does self come from? You talk about self so much. Where does it come from? I used to could never answer that question. I didn't know how. But when we get toward the end of this chapter, it's going to talk about a man. And it's going to talk about an experience that this man had. And it's going to talk about this being a part of our makeup. So just the same as this power is a part of my makeup, so is the self. So that means we've written a book which we believe, key word, to be spiritual as well as moral. It means, of course, we're going to talk about God. Here, difficulty arises with agnostics. Many times we talk to a new man and watch his hope rise as we discuss his alcoholic problems, and explain our fellowship. But his face falls when we speak of spiritual matters. My first meeting I ever went to of Alcoholics Anonymous, at the end of it, it just almost made me sick. I thought, oh, yeah, I knew it. I knew, because they circled up. They wanted to hug and hold hands and all this shit and say a prayer. And it made me sick because I had a pretty rough childhood growing up. And there were some things that happened to me that shouldn't happen to people, anybody at any age, for damn sure that age. And I can remember praying and asking God for help with that. And at the time, none came. And then I would watch my mama get beat. And I would pray for God to help. And God didn't come. And then I went to jail for a very long time. And I prayed for God to not let me go to jail. And I went anyway. So my question is, man, don't talk to me about God. Don't talk to me about God. If there is a God, he certainly doesn't have anything for me, and I don't care to hear it, and I don't want to hear your prayers. And I was just so closed-minded and so crazy. But I did, my face fell whenever they spoke of spiritual matters, because I knew then what the entire program was probably going to be about. They explained it to me like this. Step 1 is the problem. Step 2 is the solution. The other 10 steps will keep you in the solution. And if you're not in that solution, you're going back to the problem. And the problem is lack of power. You have to connect to the power. We don't care if you call him God, good old dude, group of drunks, grow or die. It doesn't matter what you say or how you term it. You're going to have to figure something out that works for you. And for me today, that's the creator. So it says, we have reopened a subject which our man thought. And I love how he keeps throwing that word in there. We thought we had neatly invaded or entirely ignored. We only thought that. That's not the way it was. But because of where my mind was, where my thinking was, where my beliefs was, I thought that I had neatly invaded or entirely ignored God. How the hell is that even possible? Well, we know how he feels. We have shared his honest doubt. We know where doubt comes from. That comes from the mind. And prejudice. And anytime we look at that word prejudice in this book, we're not going to be looking at color of skin. We're going to be talking about old ideas, old beliefs, old concepts. Now, some of us have been violently anti-religious. I can remember being in jail, and they come around with Bibles. And I can remember getting one and throwing it to the floor in front of those nice people who brought those to me that year. And I can remember saying, don't ever bring anything or like that around here again. And I told the guys in the cell, if anybody picks that up, I'll kill you in your sleep. And meant it with all my heart. Violently anti-religious. I just hated the word God, me thinking, Jesus Christ, oh my God, don't talk to me about that ever, ever. Thank God for this chapter. It saved me from all that crap. It says to others, the word God brought up a particular, and here's the key word, idea of him, with which someone had tried to impress them during childhood. That goes back to that unlearning what we have learned by those who were wounded, who taught it to us. Perhaps we rejected this particular conception because it seemed inadequate. With that rejection, we, key word right here, imagined. That imagination is pretty wild at times like this. But I imagine that I've abandoned the God, key word here, idea entirely. We were bothered with the thought. There's the key word, the thought. We see it over and over and over. What's going to need to change here in order for us to recover is those very things that we keep pointing out over and over and over through here. We're bothered with the thought that faith and dependence upon a power beyond ourselves was somewhat weak, even cowardly. Now, that was just a thought, remember. That doesn't mean that's the way we are. We looked up on this world of warring individuals, warring theological systems, and inexplicable calamity with deep skepticism. We look asking at many individuals who claim to be godly. How could a supreme being have anything to do with it at all? And who could comprehend? Keyword, comprehend. We know where a comprehension comes from. A supreme being anyhow. Yet in other moments we found ourselves, keyword, thinking. When enchanted by a starlit night, who then made all this? There was the feeling. There it is again, keyword, feeling of awe and wonder, but it was fleeting and soon lost. And that's kind of how my recovery is on self-will. It's fleeting and very soon lost. So I can have an experience, but if I'm not grounded in this, I will lose that experience pretty quick. And I did that for years. Now that is an exercise in this chapter, the very first one that we come up on in this work. This is one of 3. And it says, we found ourselves thinking when enchanted by a starlit night, who then made all this? There's a feeling of awe and wonder, but it's fleeting and soon lost. So the exercise was for me to reflect back on the times when I've had those aha moments with God. Our book calls it a starlit night. I had one at the edge of the Grand Canyon in 2010. I was standing there with my wife. We were looking out over this massive hole in the earth, and it was one of the most beautiful scenes that I had ever been around. And I just thought, my God, I got lost up in that moment, just with peace and serenity. There was no thought. It was just, wow, this is beautiful, like it talks about here on page 46, A Starlit Night. But the feeling of awe and wonder, it says, was fleeting and soon lost. And that's absolutely what happened to me, because in just a couple of seconds, the thought came to my mind, it's a long way to the bottom of this deal. And if you get too close to that, you're going to fall off. And if you do, you're never coming back. Well, what do you think happened to my aha moment with God? It was gone. The other thought come in and took it away. Another time I was on my fishing boat, and the water was just like glass, had the cork, it was dabbling, it was bobbing. And I was just caught up in that moment with God, or this power. And just like that, something come, oh my God, what if something's happened to one of your kids at school today? I mean, where the hell would a thought come from like that, just out of the blue? And it disturbed me so much that I had to leave from where I was at and go check on those kids, which, they were okay. But really what this is going to show us is that when we're in these moments, if we're aware of our thought process, which we come to do as we move on through this work, we don't have to lose those experiences like we once did. And if you reflect on that very much, I'm sure you've probably had some of those yourself. So that's the first of 3 exercises in the book. It says, yes, we have agnostic temperaments, have had these, key word here, thoughts and experiences. Look which one comes first. Thoughts come first and then the experience, right? Yeah, that's exactly what happens. Every action is born in thought, always. Let us make haste to reassure you, we found that as soon as we were able to lay aside prejudice, old ideas, and express even a willingness to believe in a power greater than ourselves, we commence to get results. What a beautiful promise that is. Commence, that word means to start. It's not where it ends, but that's where it starts. Even though it was impossible for any of us to fully define or comprehend that power, which is God, if I could understand God, I'd be God. And I hear that in meetings all the time, God doesn't understand God. But my book says God has understood God. Now, it talks about here comprehending that power, comprehending and fully defining. I've had people try to do that to me. And, before Alcoholics Anonymous, I didn't know any better. Today, I know that means anybody. Nobody can fully comprehend or define that power, which is God. We just can't. But we can come to know a God as we understood him. And I think that word is so important in here, because what I understood about God in year 1 was different than what I understood about God in year 2 and 5 and 10 and 15 and 20 and 25 and then almost 30 now years later. What I've understood has changed, but did I ever understand God, or have I ever? No, and I don't think I ever will. For me to understand something, that's it. I'm finished. I'm done. I understand. So the book says, much to our relief, and man, this was a relief. Yes. We discovered that we did not need to consider another conceptions of God. Man, that blew me away the first time I ever read that and fully understood what it was saying. I had people that were trying to push religion down my throat. They told me there was only one way to get to God, and if I didn't take that path, that was it. I was going on a bad ride that didn't end up very good. Hell, I'd already been on one. And so I had a lot of relief in discovering that I didn't need to consider their conception of God. I can remember my first sponsor telling me, won't you write a letter of everything that you would like for God to be? And I did that, and I brought it back to him. And I remember him saying, well, maybe this is what God would like from you as well. You think you can maybe compromise here some? And, that was pretty good in the beginning. That really worked. But we're going to come up on an exercise, I think, that has much more depth and weight than doing anything like that. So it says our own conception, however inadequate, was sufficient to make the approach and effective contact with him. Now, that's a whole lot more than just believing in God. Making an approach and effecting a contact. Now, that's something I had never done, that I was aware of anyway. It says, as soon as we admitted the possible existence of a creative, intelligent spirit of the universe underlying the totality of things, we begin to be possessed. What a word. Now, I've been possessed by some things in my life, I'll promise you, but never by a new sense of power and direction like it talks about here. A new sense of power and direction. But there is a condition, and this is what it is, provided I take the other simple steps. If I don't take those other simple steps, which is going to be 3 through 12, then all of this stuff that I'm about to experience in this chapter is going to be null and void, because it's not going to be very good. It's just not going to. I will lose that. So it says, we found that God does not make too hard of terms to those who seek him. Thank God for that. To us, the realm of the spirit, which come to find out is within me. We will learn this as we move on through this chapter. Almost any spiritual book that has significant value to it that I've ever read always talks about the realm of spirit being within, always. Obviously, there's some things I'm going to have to clean up with inside of myself in order to approach and make that contact. But once I do that, no longer do I not drink whiskey. Hell, I don't even want to anymore. The miracle isn't that I haven't acted out today. The miracle is I haven't even wanted to today. And I used to want to every day, all day. So, yeah. God does not make too hard of terms to those who seek him. To us, the realm of the spirit is broad, roomy, all-inclusive, never exclusive or forbidding to those who earnestly seek, and I think earnestly being our key word here. It is open, we believe, to all men. Now, that's not what I was taught at the church. That's only open to a few, provided you do certain things. We believe it is open, he says, to all men. So when therefore we speak to you of God, we mean your own conception of God. This applies too to other spiritual expressions which you might find in this book. So whatever this conception of God for me turns out to be, as I move through this book and I look at other spiritual expressions in it, what I really need to do is be using my conception other than trying to look at other people's conceptions or what I would like for it to be, this or that, because that just tangles me up. And I want to follow the directions here pretty much to the letter. So it says this: do not let any prejudice, an old idea, you may have against spiritual terms, and we're going to pay real close attention to that, deter you from honestly asking yourself what they mean to you. That's the second of 3 exercises that we will be looking at in this book. Now look at what it says at the start. Now we're not talking about the long haul. At the start, this was all we needed to commence spiritual growth, to effect our first conscious relation with God as we understood him, not God as we understand him. That's all we needed to commence spiritual growth and effect a first conscious relation. How beautiful is that? I've never been able to do that in my life. I don't know about you. But look at what it says afterward. We found ourselves accepting many things which then seemed entirely out of reach. That was growth. But if we wish to grow, we had to begin somewhere. So we're going to use our own conception, however limited it was. I'm going to ask my friend Ashley if she will put the template for this exercise on the screen. And if you guys want to pinch in and scroll it up, this is what I do with the people that I take through this process of the book. We want to do exactly what it says at the top of page 47. Do not let any prejudice you may have against spiritual terms deter you from honestly asking yourself what they mean to you. So from a place of prayer and meditation, as best I could, I want to take this template, which has a line drawn right down the middle of it. You could do it on a notebook or anything. I want to look at spiritual terms and prejudice that have bothered me so much that I wouldn't even consider anything about God. Now, for me, you can see that the first 5 or 6 or 7, how many ever is there, you can see what those are. That comes from a set of Christian beliefs that were tried to be impressed on me when I was a child. Now, trust me, this list was much longer than that. But the word Jesus Christ absolutely made me sick to my stomach. And I hated it. I couldn't stand it. Well, the book says, don't let that deter you from asking yourself what it honestly means to you. So what does this term mean to me, honestly? Well, it's not asking me to look up the word and see what it means. It's asking me, what does this mean to me? That word meant punishment and death. That's all I'd ever heard. He was killed. It was our fault. None of us are ever good enough. And I just hated that. I could not agree with that. And so that's what that word meant to me. Holy Spirit, someone that watched me, someone that judged me. That's what I thought it meant. It doesn't mean any of those things at all to me like that today. The word ceremony. I'm a Native American here in Oklahoma. I love ceremonies. A lot of them are righteous. That's what it meant. So you can kind of see how this exercise goes as you go down through it. The main thing is to do it prayerfully. And if you do it prayerfully, what we're going to begin to see is a lot of these conceptions don't even really make a hell of a lot of sense. And for me to even to believe that to begin with is crazy. And for when that starts to change, the word God no longer bothers me because that's a term. So look at what it says. Afterwards, we found ourselves accepting many things which seemed then entirely out of reach. I can accept Jesus Christ today. I can accept the Holy Spirit. I can accept these things. And why can I accept them? Is because it wasn't those things. It's the way that they presented that to me that I couldn't accept. And I thought that I couldn't accept God or anything about any of that. It had nothing to do with that. It was people and the way that they taught that to me. And that might not have been entirely what they taught, but that's entirely what I heard. And that's what stayed in my mind until I took this exercise. Powerful, powerful beginning right here. The reflection exercise on 46, the spiritual terms exercise on 47. This is a great way to begin to thumbs up here, thumbs up. So this is a great way to take a look at this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make one of those templates up or whatever I need to do. And I'm going to sit down. I'm going to prayerfully do this. Now, I had been a student of this book for many years. And I worked with Joe and Charlie in the beginning, and I worked with a lot of people. You know, I was very blessed to have some good mentors in my life. I really was. But I never seen this. I never seen this in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous in all the years. God, I was even doing book studies and speaking at meetings and doing all this stuff. And I come in 2019 dying from lust and needed a new experience in a bad, bad way. And I started going through this book with a man. And we got over to here, and it was just almost like I was reading a new book. I could not. I could not. I was like, how could I have missed that? But that's exactly what it means to me today. It's the word God no longer haunts me. That's just a term. Man, it doesn't matter if I call him the creator, if I call him Allah, I call him Buddha. It doesn't matter what I call him. That's a term. It's not about that. It's about believing and connecting to the power. And that's what's going to take my powerlessness away. That's what's going to set me on a new path. So that's probably where we'll kick it off. If anybody has a chance to do this week and really wants to take a good solid look at that, prayerfully sit down with that template or one that you make yourself. One thing I'll say right quick before I jump off here. There's about 6 spiritual terms on the prior page down at the bottom of 46. That's a good place to start. Possible existence of a creative intelligence. There's one. Spirit of the universe. There's one. Begin to be possessed by a new sense of power and direction. There's one. Power, direction. God. We found God does not make too hard of terms to those who seek him. There's one. To us, the realm of the spirit. There's one. All room exclusive, never exclusive or forbidding to those who earnestly seek. So there's some that I can start with right there. If I don't agree with those, there's a bunch of them in this book, and there's a whole lot of them that I can do if I sit prayerfully. I'll guarantee you that list it'll grow more than I think. And it's a beautiful way to experience step 2. So anyway, thank you everybody for coming out and listening tonight. Dennis and Ashley, thank you so much for your service as always. I'm really glad to be here tonight. Thanks a lot.
This concludes David's share on tonight's chapter, but we encourage you to keep listening as he answers questions from the audience and shares additional experience, strength, and hope.
I wanted to ask you a question or two, but let's go to the spiritual exercise list first. That is the individual's list. Those words are picked by the individual. Is that right?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
And then the second part is not what I think I'm supposed to write down, like Christ, Savior of the world, and like that. It's a gut reaction of this is what when I think of this word, this is what I feel. This is what I think. Right?
Yes. What does this honestly mean to me? Not what does it honestly mean, but what.
Right. Yeah. Okay. And then could you just go over again real quickly the first exercise on page 46?
I can. Absolutely. Toward the end of the first full paragraph, pretty much there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yet in other moments, we found ourselves thinking, when enchanted by a starlit night, who then made all this?
Mm-hmm.
There was a feeling of awe and wonder, but it was fleeting and soon lost. And so the exercise for me is to relax, get calm within, and reflect back on the times whenever I've had those aha moments with God, where it's just like, you ever catch yourself just mesmerized by thought? There's nothing going on, but it's like my eyes are just fixed on one thing and I can't. But eventually a thought will come along and take that experience away from me. I wanted to reflect on things like that, and I really didn't know how to do all that, so I asked for direction. And those were the things that come up. The Grand Canyon in 2010, anybody that's ever been in an airplane, look down over the clouds and sky. I mean, that's just beautiful. You can get caught up in that. So many experiences that lots of people could tell like that. But that's the first exercise in the chapter to We Agnostics, the first of three.
So when you do that, are you also looking then for what thought you had that removed it from you, that took it away?
I don't look for it. I just kind of allow it to come, because there's going to be a thought come and try to steal the exercise, actually.
Uh-huh.
But really, that's what I'm going to want to do moving forward. I'm going to want to watch for those thoughts, and I've never known how to do that. So that's why, for me, in this lineage, we always start with thought watching in 10. So as we move through the book, we get to this. This makes a little more sense than it does, somebody who hasn't had that experience. So, yes.
Okay. Thank you. Can I ask one more quickie? It's kind of a stickler. I don't know whether it is that important, but on the top of page 44, why did they say or? If when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, or
if when drinking.
When you are drinking, you cannot have a little. Do you have any idea when, like, both conditions exist? Hopeless state of mind and body?
Well, I think once that I begin to drink or act out or whatever it is, then the mind has very little to say about that anymore. I think that's what leads us to it. But I think once that starts, and I've had many occasions where the mind said, hey, man, we need to go home. We don't need to be doing this. We need to get out of here. So I think either or.
Good luck. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, David, thank you for this study again. I'm glad you're here.
Yeah.
And
thank you.
I'll relinquish my questioning.
Yeah, this is just a comment. This is what David had taught me too. Back on page 25, at the very bottom, the last sentence, that is in, there is a solution. I love how it ties right in on the very first page of 44, because it says, one was to go unto the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation. Step one, and I know that well, as best we could. And the other was to accept spiritual help. Step two. Well, going back to page 44, it gives us those same two choices again: to be doomed to a sexaholic or alcoholic death, or to live on a spiritual basis. Step two, are not always easy alternatives to face. I didn't know why that was, because when I first came in, I had a strong faith tradition. I thought, well, of course I'll take the spiritual basis. That's what I want. But why couldn't I? They didn't know. And what was pointed out, and David showed me on page 45, that, my problem wasn't acting out. It wasn't alcohol and drugs. That's what I thought my problem was. And as long as that was my focus, is to quit doing those things, I couldn't recover because my focus wasn't in the right place. When I realized that my problem wasn't lust, it wasn't alcohol and drugs, it wasn't a lack of faith in God, it was a lack of power, lack of being connected to that power. That changed everything for me. And I started to realize that self's will was blocking me from that power. And it even tells us on 64 that we had to find and get rid of the things in ourselves that are blocking us. And once that became obvious and the tools and the principles of this program, man, everything changed. And I'm excited as we work through this book. For those that haven't seen that, David's going to show you how he showed me just what that meant. And every day that I get to stay connected to the power, which the reason they weren't easy alternatives is because it meant death of self's will, death of ego. My pride and ego had to go away. But then once I connected that, I had lived on a higher system of thought and I was free. I didn't need the medication anymore. And so the goal going forward is to continue to watch for those manifestations of self that would pull me back out of the present moment of that connection and put me back into fear or put me back into the past, into resentments. And that's where I'm going right back into the insanity. So I get to live in sanity, thank God, because now I know the problem isn't the alcohol and the lust. The problem is staying connected to the power. And I'll pass.